Hello, thank you for joining us today for episode 127 of The World Beyond Belief. I'm your co-host, Mindy Erkin, and with me today, as always, is your host, Paul Marco.
Hi, and welcome to The World Beyond Belief. It's good to have you here. It's always nice to talk to you. Today we have a jam-packed program for you. We're going to talk about a little situation that we had where we had our beliefs shaken and we were able to right the boat again. And we'll talk through that process with you because I'm sure if you're in the awakening, you're going to be experiencing what we did or similar things all along the awakening, and that's for good reason. So we'll talk you through that process. Then we're going to look at a conceptualization by Max Igan that explains the awakening process, and he uses the metaphor of a computer program, how we can be compared to that in the process of our awakening. I think you'll enjoy that. If you don't know about Max Igan, before we play that, we'll give you his website and how to get in touch with him. He's probably one of the most inspiring men on the planet. He's very awake, very aware, and very loving. So we'll tell you all about Max while we play that, or before, during, or after, or something. We're also going to get into a process that I call walking the fringe. And I'm going to talk about what that process involves and why it's really important to the awakening, to you, and to the entire consciousness. You know, we're in a period of time when consciousness wants to awaken. We as conscious beings, and consciousness itself wants to move to the next level. And the only reason we're not doing it spontaneously and right now is because we have the archons sitting on our chest. And they're going to have less and less power as we go on. But remember that the awakening wants to happen. And it's unnatural for the awakening not to happen. We'll talk about that as we go. In the second hour, I have maybe it's a treat. We're going to go over, since this is the end of the year, 2014, we're going to go over some of the things that I thought were really significant events in the awakening, wonderful, encouraging events in the awakening that happened during 2014. And then I'm going to make some predictions. I'm going to make some predictions for 2015. Now, my predictions are based on straight line data. In other words, I don't have any particular psychic power or any way to get any more information than you do. I just have been watching what's going on and kind of in a straight line predictions, I'm going to try to make some calls for 2015. Now, if the past is any indication, my predictions have not been exactly right on target, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so you can take them with a grain of salt. You can enjoy them because they're all optimistic.
That's right, and that's really a good sign that they haven't been very accurate because things have turned out to be much better than you anticipated they would be.
Right, I'm anticipating good things this year, though. Since we're shifting to a more positive timeline, since we have shifted to a more positive timeline, I think you'll enjoy these predictions. If you can stick around for the second hour, we're going to get heavily involved in that. So without further ado, let's start the agenda. We had a kind of a sobering experience. There's a man who's known pretty much throughout the awakening community called Kevin Annette. Now, he is a person that we became aware of maybe 4 or 5 years ago, and his main shtick is he's putting together world courts through what he calls the ITCCS, and don't ask me what that means, to try people who are accused of child molestation, pedophilia, murder, blah, 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 blah. And he was trying major players. He was trying the popes. He was trying Queen Elizabeth. And he claimed that he was getting results, he was getting convictions, and it was just a matter of time until he could mobilize some type of force that would be able to bring them to justice. We love the idea. You know, when you see so much bad news and you see something like this come up, you think, oh, wow, you know, the awakening is happening and it's really coming to fruition, and guys like this are able somehow to stand up and really make a difference, and this is happening. So we would listen to Kevin and his different broadcasts down through the years. And then one day we were searching around for other things and came upon an interview with, I think it was 3 people that worked for Kevin.
In his organization, the ITTC, whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And these people didn't have a nice thing to say about Kevin. They've called him a psychopath many times. And they talked about him being totally absorbed by his ego and, you know, not doing what he purported to be doing. And we kind of, at that point, I think we took everything off the website.
That's right, we did. We did, because we had our doubts whether he was a reliable source, and time went by and we decided, well, maybe he is. Maybe those people were put up to discrediting him.
Right. Since he was supposedly he was doing things against the control system, we thought maybe they were shills sent by the control system to discredit him so he couldn't continue. Those types of things happen. So you can see how risky it is to go outside of the core consensual reality and look for really what's real. It's a dangerous thing because you don't know who's an agent, who's a counter-agent, and these guys are really tricky. The cabal, the cabal that runs the matrix are really tricky, and they deceive you, and then they counter-deceive you, and then they counter-deceive you back. So it's really tough to keep on top of who's saying what. You know, it's much easier than it is in core central reality because you know that that's all bullshit, with little exceptions. And it's all designed to manipulate you, and if you know where they're going, it's easy to see how they plan to get there. But when you're walking on the fringe like we do, you really have to pay close attention all the time. Now, with Kevin Annette, we had been encouraged to reconsider Kevin by close friends here. And also, we found that he was talking with Alfred Lambermont Weber. And if you listen to this broadcast even a little bit, you know that we kind of value what he says. Alfred Lambermont Weber seems to be a good source for us. He seems to be credible. And actually, when we did our research on Ebola, we used Alfred Lambermont Weber's Ebola Gate site for a lot of our information, and it was right on target and accurate and verifiable by other sources. And so we thought over the last maybe a year that since Alfred was interviewing Kevin, that Kevin is actually for real. And then, on the 22nd, 21st of December here, we tuned into Alfred's site, his channel, and he was interviewing 2 people from Vancouver who were involved with Kevin's project. And one was a native Canadian indigenous person, and the other was a really dynamic activist named Alex Hunter.
That's right.
The indigenous person's name was Watsek. And they really made a big case for Kevin being simply a fraud and perhaps a double agent. And Alfred was in there interviewing them, so we didn't know what had happened. We didn't know whether Kevin had been exposed, and Alfred thought that he should try to save face by interviewing these other people. We were just kind of lost. And for a while, actually until this morning, we had lost a lot of faith in Alfred Lambermont Weber because he was, interviewing this guy who we had seemingly credible sources discrediting. But we listened to Albert today, and Alfred, Alfred apologized, explained his entire relationship with Kevin down through the years, and also explained his process for going through and discovering what Kevin was all about. Now, the reason I bring this up, and the reason this is important, even though Kevin Annette is under the bus, as far as I'm concerned, it's just a matter of time until he's totally out of the picture, I would imagine. But the process that Alfred and Mindy and I went through is a common process that we all have to go through. When you're looking at information and sources that are iffy, you have to do your best to qualify them. And you can't always qualify them on facts and figures. Sometimes it has to be your intuition. And a big thing that I do is to kind of triangulate the information they're giving with other pieces of information that we know to be true. If they were coming out with something that we know is way off base and definitely benefits the control system, then we start doubting. But, these guys are clever, and you're going to be taken in. We were taken in. Alfred was taken in. And what you have to do when you're taken in is you have to do something that we were never taught to do in school, that they don't talk about in the media, that George W. Bush refused to do, and that's say, I was wrong, I'm sorry. I was wrong, I'm sorry. That's part of the awakening. And I think we talk about this most days most days that we're on podcast, because it's the major function in the awakening. Rooting around in what might be true, looking at information, triangulating with other information you have, and then sticking with it, but being willing at the drop of a hat when you get new information to just let it go and move on. And don't beat yourself up about it. It's just what happens during the awakening. There's so much deception out there. The control system that controls the matrix controls it through lies and deception. That's their major thing. They have things like problem, reaction, solution, and what David Icke calls the totalitarian tiptoe, where they do little things at a time. But, their stock and trade is lies, deception, and
bullshit.
Basically, they're bullshit artists. So,
and then there's very good people with the best of intentions being co-opted, maybe because they're being targeted with psychic weaponry, maybe their families are being threatened, and they get bought by the control system to begin to be disinformation agents, and maybe they never were up to a particular point. So it can happen to anyone under the kind of tactics that the control system uses.
Yeah, they have millions of dollars. If you look at the Sandy Hook hoax, I don't know whether any of you have gotten a chance to see the video, We Need to Talk About Sandy Hook, but it's pretty much a psyop if you look at the information. And you'd say, well, how can that number of people keep quiet and go along with that psyop? How is it possible? Well, it's possible if you are psychopathic and you'll do anything to keep them quiet, including murder, which happens all the time. And it happened all the time around Sandy Hook and the players in Sandy Hook.
Well, you told me there was an inordinate amount of money given to the crisis actors for playing those roles.
Right. Not only did they get it from the cabal and the control system, they're bribed, but also they were allowed to fundraise, and the massive amounts of donations they've gotten. I mean, these people, if it's true, which I would bet anything it's not, but if it's true they lost one child, I mean, how many millions of dollars do you need to do to carry on with your life? I mean,
that never made any sense to me.
No. So they have unlimited resources, and they're not hampered by anything like scruples or common sense. I mean,
or ethics or morality.
No, they work on, and we've talked about this many times in the program, where they're all out for their own ego, their own self, and they work under the guise of situational ethics. Where whatever the situation is, I'll custom make my ethics to that situation. And if I have to kill somebody to make that happen, I kill them. Sometimes in a very brutal way to set up, a warning for the next person's. Also, they use bribery a lot, and that's why pedophilia and child sacrifice are always in those power circles, because bribery and extortion that's part of the game too. So it's a tough path when you're trying to do awakening, and you're part of the awakening. But as I said many times on the show, you really can't stop. Once you see what they're doing, and once you see that consciousness really wants to awaken, you've got to do something to stop them. And so as long as we're able, we're going to continue to broadcast, do what we can, bring to the attention of the public. Oh, speaking of that, one of the men that was interviewed, besides Watzik, now Watzik was a native Canadian indigenous person who was kidnapped from his family at age 6, given massive amounts of vaccines, the scars from which we've seen, and beaten, and seen his friends beaten. The other man, Alex Hunter, he's been an activist from the jump, and he's been shot with ELF, low-frequency energy weapons. Him and his family, and not only his family, but his friends, acquaintances, were hit with this stuff. Also, his son, who ended up refusing to get vaccines, has an interesting story.
Yeah, he went to school one day and was called into the principal's office or the nurse's office, and was jumped from two sides with two nurses who injected him with vaccines against his will, against the will of his family, who said, no, we do not give permission for him to be vaccinated, and they did it to him.
So they're pretty ruthless, and they're pretty tricky, so you have to watch out. Go ahead.
Right. Well, I was just going to say, Kevin Annette is an interesting story, because on the surface what he's doing is exposing the crime of pedophilia, and, especially inside the church and the royal families. So you would think that he would be on our side, exposing the bad guys.
Right.
But what he did was say that he tried and prosecuted them. I mean, what is the point of that except to say, okay, well, we'll let people think that we've been reprimanded and tried for our crimes, and they don't have to worry about it anymore?
Yeah, that's how it goes. When there's a rising opposition, people are finding out the killing nature of the popes and the queens and that whole cabal. It's coming out. I mean, it can't help but come out. We're in the age of Aquarius. We're in the age of I know, and we're in the age of the consciousness awakening. So it's going to come out. So those factions want to manage the coming out. So they get a psychopath like Kevin Annette to play this role. It's a complete diversion. Also, people started coming forward and revealing to Kevin Annette what they had been through. Well, that's perfect for the cabal. They want to know people who will come forward. They want to know the stories. They want to know the tales. And so they can subvert that information. So they always manage both sides. And whatever would come out, remember we were talking last time about the CIA torture report? Mm-hmm. And I said, that's the tip of the iceberg. That's what they always do. As horrible as that report was, it's the tip of the iceberg because that's how they operate.
Oh, right. This is what they call controlled opposition.
Right.
Right.
So they let a little out, everybody's horrified, and then they get used to it, and then it goes away. And the real stuff
never comes
to light. Although I noticed in the news this week, there's a lot more stuff coming out of the CIA report. I remember there was a videotape, a missing videotape of, I don't know whether it would be U.S. employees, whoever the torturers are. They could be, Blackwater, they could be psychologists, who knows who they are. But they would rape the children in front of the mothers as a torture device. That's pretty horrible. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be more and more things coming out of that. Because I'll tell you, the CIA report, that 500-page report, tip of the iceberg. And we need to keep on that. We need to keep doing something on that. Also, last week I was kind of interested in some law enforcement agency, some municipality taking up the, I don't know, what could you call it, the banner of defending the world against crimes against humanity, defending humanity against crimes against humanity. And I was thinking that these organs of violence, the police and the military, were brave and, willing to go in and do what was necessary. But after thinking about it and actually realizing that nothing like that is going to happen, I've kind of put that torch down. Mm. I think that their mind control, well, first of all, they're taught to be obedient. I mean, I don't think you could take a job in the military or any of the arms of violence without being taught to be obedient. That's probably the first thing they do in a boot camp or your intro training. You have to prove that you're obedient. So they're obedient to begin with. Second of all, they can be controlled by ELF weapons. They're outfitted with electro machines that are on their body. They're probably RFID chipped so that they can be emotionally controlled. So I don't have much faith in the organs of violence turning on the control system. I think it might be coming about in a different way, although they could stand up and say no. And I think that's an important function that they might play. All right, well, so much for that. We're gonna move along and get into the section that features Max Igan. Now, Max Igan is an amazing Australian guy. He's incredibly articulate. He's a high-level thinker. I can't think of anybody higher-level thinker. He's full of love. He's full of compassion. He works tirelessly to ensure that the awakening's taking place. His website is thecrowhouse.com. thecrowhouse.com. Do yourself a favor, visit him. Listen to a few of his videos, see what he's about. He also has a new project that's coming online in January that you might want to get involved in. And he's an amazing man. You'll love his little explanation of what's going on. He's started to publish the first 15 minutes of his hour-long talks. And this is one of those first 15 minutes. And I thought it was so good. I listened to it 2 or 3 times, and I was going to try to relate it myself, but, I'm not nearly as articulate as he is. And even though I can think of a million tangents off of this story, and we'll go over them after, I think to let Max explain this analogy is the right thing for me to do.
Let's do it.
Okay.
When we find ourselves devoid of passion and purpose, the first thing we need to do is stop. But that's not easy. The rest of the world is zooming by at full speed, and left alone by ourselves without a project to occupy us, we can become nervous and self-critical about what we should be doing and feeling. This can be so uncomfortable that we look for any distraction rather than allowing ourselves the space to be as we are. And this week's opening quote comes from Donna Markova. Welcome to Surviving the Matrix, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Max Igan. It's a pleasure to be with you once again, and I will be your host for the next hour. When we look at the world and we look at the problems of the world, very often we look for remedies to these problems somewhere in the past. Often when we're in search of self-discovery, again, we look to the old philosophers, we look for what people have written down in books, and we look to the past. And the reality is that there will be no solutions to our current dilemma that will be found in the past, because humankind is now entering uncharted waters, uncharted territory, and really it's been that way ever since the inception of life. And one of our problems has been that when we are confronted with new problems or new situations, we always rummage around in the past looking for a remedy rather than simply using it as an opportunity for a new form of self-expression. And you can't blame us for thinking this way, because we've been trained to think this way over a very long period of time. So the real problem is that we've been trained to, when confronted with a problem, to look in the wrong direction and always base our lives on past data, but we shouldn't be looking at things this way, because every day brings a new beginning and a new opportunity, and each day brings something more than what was available the day before. It's just that very often we're stuck in the past, or we're living our lives in anticipation for the future. There are very few people who actually live in the now and experience the world for what it is in that moment. They're always caught up in how they got here or where they're going, but rarely where they are. Now, when you look at this and you begin to realize that this is generally the way most people think, it becomes a little perplexing. You have to wonder why this is the overall state of human consciousness, broadly speaking. And you begin to see that it's a result of the education system. The education system always focuses on the past. Here are the old ways. Here's the way the smart people from the past told us we should do things. And so this is the way you need to do things now, and this is the way things need to stay. When we go to school, we're not developing new forms of self-expression ourselves as students. We are learning what was put there for us in the past to learn. So we are essentially learning the old ways as designated by the education system. Of course, there's a lot of stuff in there that we do need. I mean, it's important that we learn history so that we don't repeat history, but you'll find that history is actually one of the most neglected topics in the education system, when it should be one of the most prominent. Simply so, people know not to repeat past mistakes. That's really the main purpose of learning history. It isn't really a matter of the great importance of knowing how we got here, although it is interesting to find out how we got here. But the real issue, however, is not knowing how we got here, but just recognizing the fact that we are here and that we need to move forward from this point in a positive direction, and we don't want to be repeating past mistakes. And so we have to stop repeating and basing our life and our existence and our understanding of reality upon what is written down in books by those who came before us. We need to understand that all of the books that were written by the old philosophers and all of this data, this is simply one person sharing with you their perspective of how reality worked for them and the changes they were able to make to their lives, which led to their personal improvement, in the hope that you may find clues in there which will help you on your own path to self-discovery. But there's no good you taking that reality on as your own, and there's no good you really trying to find yourself in the words of others, even though sometimes these words may help. What we have to do is to realize that we are here to create, we are here to express ourselves, and we are here to reach the fullest of our potential through our own creative expression. And we need to remember to do that and stop basing our expression and our knowledge of what reality is on someone else's idea. We have to be free to rediscover ourselves so that we can express ourselves in every way possible. Because the only thing that is actually impossible is that which you believe is impossible, and we are trained to believe that a lot of things are impossible because we're trained to operate and believe reality works according to someone else's idea, and these are the ideas that we have learnt in books. And we've never really stepped back from that and been free to express ourselves from our own unique point in creation. I mean, there is a lot of good things in the education system, and there's a lot of skills that we need, but in amongst that is woven an insidious training mechanism by which people are conditioned to think in a certain way. And I believe that this has been done very, very purposely in order that consciousness in general does not form any new neural pathways, and thereby locks us into the old system. Because you see, one of the huge things about this education system is that it's designed to prevent people from ever reaching their full potential unless they are part of a select few with certain skills that the oligarch who controls this world believe they can exploit. Many deeply philosophical and artistic people, many humanitarians, simply are not able to function in this system. And this is because these are individuals who are well adjusted to life and therefore cannot be well adjusted to this system. And as said by Jiddu Krishnamurti, it is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. And that's what we have. And those who get discarded are generally people who have big ideas and simply cannot function within a corporate system, and so the system discards them by default simply because they are not able to fit in. This system doesn't want people that are going to be bringing in new ideas. They don't want any new neural pathways to be formed, and there's a very good reason for this. In fact, in saying that, I'm reminded of a quote by Albert Einstein, and I'm paraphrasing here, but the quote goes something along the lines of, "A problem will never be solved using the same level of thinking that created the problem." And that is what this system is training us to do. It's training us to maintain the same level of thinking generally as an overall society as what we've always been. And it's designed to squash any independent thought and ensure that any ideas that come forth need large financial backing in order to make it to the ears of the general public. And of course, the only ideas that are going to get financial backing are the ideas that support the system or support the agenda of the oligarchs. Now, in considering the progression or evolution, if you like, of human consciousness, in as much as the more we learn, the more consciousness expands, the more reality is able to express itself. And in saying that the oligarchs have constructed an education system to constrain human consciousness whereby no new neural pathways are formed, in order to explain this and hopefully try to put it into terms that make it more easily understandable, imagine reality as being a computer. Just for demonstration purposes, imagine that we exist in a mainframe. And imagine that within this mainframe is an organic biological computer consisting of all the elements of the universe, including those which give life. The energy that powers this computer is the conscious stuff of reality itself. And imagine that this mainframe is self-forming, running programs of self-discovery and basically experimenting with creation to see what it can create, if indeed it can possibly even create another version of itself. Imagine the arena where the programs are run and where development takes place is the Earth. And imagine we are the tools by which this progress is happening. We are essentially the component parts running through the active RAM of this computer, and the thoughts that we have as living human beings, the ideas we have and the new philosophies and creations we create from these thoughts are the software which forms the new expressions and the new creations of self-expression. Okay, and you can just view this as a hypothetical, and I hope I didn't confuse things by putting it that way. Okay, so now imagine this is all going on, and consciousness periodically, as it's collected new data, upgrades itself. And when this upgrade takes place, the entire mainframe upgrades itself. So that when the upgrade happens, there's no way to maintain anything of the old system, because the upgrade is an entire mainframe upgrade. It's like going from a PC to a Mac, or from Windows to Linux, or whichever way you want to put it. It's like moving to an entirely new kernel, so there is no part of the old operating system that remains viable for the new upgrade. So imagine this is going on, and this is how consciousness upgrades itself or moves to the next level. This is how each shift takes place. It's all based on the data that we've been able to gain and the new expressions of creation that we've been able to create. But periodically during these upgrades, there are certain rogue elements that appear throughout the program. There are certain rogue programs, if you will, that arise to the surface and realize that there's an upgrade about to happen. And they realize that when this upgrade happens, none of the luxuries that they become accustomed to are going to exist anymore. None of the comfy little position and the puppeteering of humanity they are used to is going to exist anymore. None of the control mechanism that they have put in place, none of the way they have been using this system to serve their own purposes is going to go with them. And so they work to prevent this upgrade from taking place. And there are two main methods by which they accomplish this. One is to prevent the creation of any new neural pathways, and the other is to control the polarity of the energy we are feeding into the system. Because, of course, the system gets its information and its data from us through our expression. But our expression has been limited, it's been contained and curtailed, and we have been led to a point where now we are always searching through past data rather than forming new neural pathways, which may lead to the mainframe discovering itself and being able to perform the ultimate in self-expression. So if you look at reality and the progression of human consciousness using this model, you see that this is where we are at this particular point. And it's important to understand that this is ultimately a result of us constantly referring to old data that the computer has already collected, when what our job is supposed to be is to express ourselves to the fullest of our potential in order to create new neural pathways that will lead ultimately to self-realization for the entire mainframe. Now also imagine that the energy that runs through this computer has two major polarities. There are lots of points that exist in between, but there are two major polarities, and these two polarities can be expressed by the energies of love and the energies of fear. If the energy of love is prevalent, running throughout the mainframe and throughout the program, the upgrade in consciousness takes place. But if the energy running through the program is an energy of fear, then the upgrade cannot happen. Those who currently control the sandpit would very much like for this upgrade not to happen, because, as I said, if the upgrade does happen, then everything they have created gets left behind. And so they are desperate to keep reality the way it is and to maintain the status quo. And the easiest way to do that is to get the entire planet angry, get them fighting with each other, and get them in fear, because they believe that by doing this, they will prevent the upgrade happening. But what if there is another option? What if the reality is that if the upgrade doesn't happen, the program simply ends and it begins again anew, and the mainframe, the computer that is the universe, begins its new attempt to gain the ultimate in self-expression and the ultimate understanding of itself. Now, for the purposes of our model, we can call this mainframe God.
And that was Max Igan. You can catch that entire broadcast. It's an hour-long broadcast, and that's just a great beginning. It's good the whole way through, and you can find it in Max Igan's website, thecrowhouse.com, thecrowhouse.com. I thought that the points that he made, especially his analogy with the computer, was right on target. We have been taught to look to the past, to look to the consensual reality. You know, what's been done in the past? Well, as far as anybody's memory is concerned, the computer program hasn't upgraded itself in 2,000 or 3,000 years. All that's been known in the past has been not applicable to what we're going through right now. We're upgrading consciousness. Consciousness wants to shift. Consciousness wants to change. And the only reason it's not doing it very fluidly and very easily is because we have the Archon sitting on our chest. The control system is doing everything it can to keep us in this tiny reality. And that's why in the education system, they really teach you to look to the past, to not look out, not get creative. Matter of fact, they've taken pretty much the creativity out of everything in public schools now. It's all learn, regurgitate, learn, regurgitate. That's the process. And consciousness is not going to expand with that process. We're here to create. We're here to grow. We're here to become something more than we are. And you can't do it by always looking at the past, by being controlled by the past. We run into that all the time because we'll look for new and challenging and new ideas and new ways to look at things. And we'll be told by people around us that's just not credible information. Well, it may or may not be. We're not afraid to try it on, as in our belief wardrobe, as explained in Belief Magic. We're not afraid to try it on because we have the ability to say, hey, we screwed up. It's wrong. We're here to create. We're here to look. We're here to get the upgrade to happen. I think it's also interesting that Max called it a rogue element. It's like a virus. It's like a computer virus in there that's shutting everything down. It's preventing us from moving forward. It's not natural. David Icke calls it a virus. It's like a virus that's infected the vibration of the planet. And we can't quicken our vibration because we're being held back by these rogue elements. So they don't allow us to have any new neural pathways, no new information. That reminds me, one of the programs we did a long time ago, we talked about World War II. And whatever happened in World War II, we've seen Dennis Wise's estimation of what happened in World War II, and we've seen the common explanation of what happened in World War II. Who knows what's possible? But I do know that the Rockefellers paid $138,000 to a group of people to write the comprehensive history of World War II. So that if you wanted to know what went on, you can go to that source. Even though that source is totally controlled and manipulated by the cabal, who actually funded World War II, funded both sides, created both sides, and orchestrated the whole thing. So our information is very much controlled. Now it's coming out. More information comes out every day, and you can find more things on the web. We have the wonderful internet, and they're coming out from behind the veil. They have to. If they're going to control us the way they want to control us, we have to be aware that we're being controlled and how we're being controlled. And they also don't allow new expressions. They're actually limiting our language. We lose words every year. We're being dumbed down. Our expressions are more and more limited. Now they're more and more patrolled. This week I heard that I read an article saying that, they patrol the Twitter and the Facebook and other social medias. And if your profile turns out to be something that is in disagreement with the system, you can be persecuted for it, prosecuted for it, persecuted and prosecuted for it.
Mm-hmm.
So
it's Big Brother in action. I once learned from a wonderful teacher that words create our world. And so if we can language something, then we have the ability to imagine what's possible. But with less and less words, with this politically correct agenda, there's so much less that we can language, and so our possibilities get narrowed down to smaller and smaller realm of what's possible.
Right. If you've ever watched the incredibly ingenious film called Idiocracy, you can see how that could work to create a totally, in that video or that movie, it made a ridiculous idiot run reality. But what they want is a very controllable reality. Another thing that Max said that I think is important to underline is the fact that when we're in love, when we open our hearts and we can see everybody's point of view, including the control system, and we're not in fear, then the upgrade can take place. If we're in fear, the upgrade can't take place. Now, if you look at the planet, what's going on? Well, the mainstream media and much of the alternative media are fear-mongering. Remember the Ebola crisis that came through? They're still fear-mongering the ISIL thing that's going on. We're at the brink of war with Russia. Also, North Korea is creating a threat and could create a cyber war. I mean, it's fear, 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 fear. When we go over my estimation of what happened in 2014, I hope it helps us to lift us out of fear, because a lot of good stuff happened, and a lot of good stuff is continuing to happen as we move into, the awakening that's going to take place. It's taking place now. We were talking this morning, Mindy and I, about the second coming of Christ, and that's imagined by Christians as the person Christ coming to earth and making a judgment. These guys will come with me. The rest of you guys have to. Bad things have to happen here on earth. I'm not really sure of the story. The story we like is the Sophia mythos by John Lamb Lash, who's a tremendous Gnostic scholar. And the way he talks about Christ, he talks about Christos and the divine Sophia, and how Sophia, who turned out to be our earth, Gaia, needed to be rescued by Christos early in her development, because the infections here on the planet that we're well aware of, we call them the control matrix, but it's basically an archontic infection. She had to summon him to come from the galactic center where aeons exist. Now, aeons are like creative gods, creator gods. And Christos came back, and at one point in the history of the earth, came back and put it back made a correction, similar to the one that probably we're talking about now with Max Igan. So the second coming of Christos probably happened December 21st, 2012, when we seem to have shifted to a positive timeline. And we've talked about that on this channel. And the positive timeline, I think you'll understand as we go through the events of 2014. Things that were supposed to happen, some bad things like the global coastal events, a massive NATO war on Syria, just the Ebola crisis, I think. We're unable to get traction because I think we're on a positive timeline. And if we can stay in love and out of fear, we can push that timeline very much forward. So we need to remember, stay in love, don't be afraid. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is that they can kill you, and you know you're not this. This is an avatar. This is an avatar acting out in this plane. What we are is something infinitely more greater, infinitely more wise, infinitely more wonderful. And you'll leave this limited perspective of this avatar, and you go back to the greater awareness of your over-consciousness, your greater consciousness. That's the worst that can happen. So you can stand up and not be afraid, like Alex Hunter was doing, and Watzik is now doing, and Alfred Lambermont Weber is doing, and some other people that we plan on interviewing in upcoming shows to show you what courage is and what's really going on in the world. Well, anyway, I wanted to explain another way to look at this expansion of consciousness and another strategy for expanding consciousness. When I was in graduate school, my supervising faculty member explained to me the difference between core reality, the common consensual reality, and the margins that surround that consensual reality, and then the fringes that surround the margins. If you can picture that in your mind, picture a little square, that's consensual reality. That's the limitation that the control system wants you to live in. The margins, now the reason he was explaining this to me was because I was doing a dissertation, and he wanted me to stay out of the fringes and stick to the margins because he knew I had a tendency to be a divergent thinker. And divergent thinkers in academia are a problem because they have a tendency to stray into things that aren't considered in the margins. So the idea is the control systems wants to keep you in the center, the core consensual reality. This is what I was taught in school. This is what I believe because I was taught this in school, and it's reinforced by the media. They stay in that consensual reality core. Other people can walk into the margins. Marginal thinking is like looking at ego development. You know, there's been a lot of scientifically based work on that, so it's getting to be a scientifically accepted part, but it's still not in the core reality. It's still in the margins. If you can imagine other things that are in the margins, dream work, working with dreams, interpreting dreams, and how that's all done. That's still in the margins of consensual reality. It's not so far out that you couldn't figure out how it could fit into the reality. Now the fringe is a different story. The fringe are things that the control system absolutely doesn't want you to realize has any value. Astrology is an example of that. Belief in contact with alien species. You know, they don't want you to believe that. They don't want you to believe in the conspiracy, the control system conspiracy. Those are in the fringes. And how these three things work together to limit consciousness growth and also facilitate consciousness growth, I'm going to explain to you in a few minutes, right after we take a break. I think we should take a little dancing break. Get up, dance around the living room. We're going to dance around the desk here. and we're going to dance. We're going to listen to a new person that we found called Tape 5. It's a new group called Tape 5.
Take 5.
Tape
No,
5.
it's Tape 5. I'm sorry, excuse me.
Ta-
Tape 5. And the name of the tune is... I've forgotten.
Ice from Russia.
Ice from Russia. Here we go. Ice from Russia. Tape 5.
Okay, now let's calm down. Let's stop shuffling around the living room and get back to work here. We were talking about the fringe, the margins, and the core. And I wanted to go into this a little bit and give you some examples so you knew where I was coming from when I'm talking about these concepts. The core is consensual reality. It's what you'll find on mainstream media. It's what they want you to believe. And you're not going to help the expansion of consciousness. No amount of creativity in that little realm is going to spring us. So it's a fear-based reality, and if you don't sway, we've got most of the population on the planet that really cannot get out of that core reality. And God bless them, it's they were trained to do it. The media keeps them in there. A lot of people, as we were saying, are bribed to be in there. A lot of people are blackmailed to stay in there. A lot of I feel sorry for the stars and starlets of Hollywood that sell their souls to be in there. It's not a place that's going to help us. It's a fear-based reality. Surrounding that is the margins. Now the margins looks at things that will be marginally acceptable to people in core reality. They're going to consider it to be, outside of the main believability. I mean, we made the point that dream work might be in the margins. Not too many years ago, the whole field of acupuncture and a lot of holistic healing techniques were in the margins. And some of them still are. Some of them got into the main core, although they'd like to, in terms of medicine, keep the core pretty much focused on pharmaceuticals and allopathic medicine. So that's the margins. There's room for growth in the margins, and actually you can use creativity with what you learn in the margins to really spring some new ideas. You could look at the qi and how the qi is used in acupuncture, and think of how the qi could be used to help the planet. How could does the qi radiate love? Using the qi, can you heal with the qi? I know that Mindy has worked a little bit with using qi energy just through qigong.
Yeah, it's amazing. Anyone can learn how to heal themselves and other people with qigong healing energy. It's available to us if we can open our minds and step outside of the box of consensual reality into the margins where
Right.
these techniques and this kind of information lives.
That's right. Qi energy has been known to cure all types of eye problems, just focusing on the qi going into the eye and giving it strength. When you put energies like that into your body knows what to do with it. And so it's kind of a universal healer. Well, that's the margins. So I like people that are in the margins. They really help things, and they can really move forward, unless they get caught in some kind of a cul-de-sac where they just run a do-loop with concepts that are given to them mostly by the core reality. Let's talk about the fringe. The fringe is what the control system, that's not where they want you to go. They want you to stay out of the fringe, stay out of the ideas about aliens. Remember, we did a program on the Vril, that vast energy source that was conceptualized early in the 20th century. Oh, it was like the 18th century, wasn't it? Written in 1885. I can't really remember.
I can't remember the exact date, but I think you're right about the century.
Right. But if you can't conceive of it, it can't be part of your reality. So if you can imagine your ability to conceive things in a larger area allows consciousness to expand. That's why they don't want you to go in that area. But that's also what makes it so dangerous. We talked about Kevin Annette. He was certainly operating in the margins and in the fringes, and he was a danger. We learned that he wasn't for real, and when you're in the fringes, you have to realize that, you might pick up things that were put out there to be disinformation. In the core reality, it's disinformation. In the margins, maybe or maybe not, but in the fringe, there's going to be some reality there, but there's also going to be some deception. So you have to really be careful when you're in the fringe. But the fringe, that's where the human creativity can really bloom and really take hold. You can come up with things that are so far out, and I'm going to give you a couple examples. So far out that the people in the core would say, oh, that could never happen. The margins might give it a chance. But when you're in the fringe, you're working with concepts that, if you can put them together, can really create some new ways to look at reality and expand consciousness in itself. Let me give you an example. A little while back, we worked with a way of measuring time called the saculum. Now, the saculum is a measure of human life, the lifespan. It's been around since the beginning of history. That's how people measured time. And if you look at that saculum, you can dissect it, and it's in actually it has 4 different seasons. It has an awakening, an unraveling, a crisis, and like a positive time. Those are the 4 seasons. And people that populate those seasons do different things. Now, that's a fringe idea. It's pretty laden with historical fact, and where I got it was in historical text, but it's still pretty much a fringe idea. And we were just listening to tape 5, which is a group of millennium people born between 1985 and 2005, making the same music as people did 75, 85 years ago. Is it a coincidence, or could it have something to do with the seasons of the saculum? I think it does, and I'm about to write a book on it, taking that and other fringe ideas and trying to put them together to make a larger, broader picture of reality, so that you can say, well, this happened, this happened, this happened. Well, maybe it's a pattern. Maybe it's a pattern of the universe that unfolds every 100 years like that. I don't know. I'm still doing research. But that's how you can use the fringe subjects to create a greater potential for creativity than sticking with the core. The core, you're dead end. You're going to live in fear because they're going to keep you in fear. In the margins, a little bit the same way. But you can still be creative if you can keep out of the fear and stay in love. In the fringes, you're out there by yourself. You're taking care of yourself. You're learning, and you're learning new things that encompass broader and broader reality. So,
would you say that Tesla was in the fringe with his...
Oh, absolutely. That's a really good example. Who would ever think that energy just abounds all around us? Unless, of course, you figure that we're energy beings, which you are. Everybody thinks that you need to burn something to create energy, or move something to create energy. No, energy is naturally there. And Tesla had to think outside of the box to get in there. There's probably things done by Einstein the same way. Whenever human consciousness moves forward, it generally originates in the fringe or the margin. It's not going to originate in the core, because in the core they're going to say, I don't believe that. That person has no credibility with me. And, a lot of times we say that in the fringe. But it's after we've looked at it, considered it, weighed it, see how it looks, triangulates with other things, and maybe sat with it for a while. I think sitting with ideas for a while really helps, because it allows your right brain to get active, and your right brain will tell whether it's consistent with the universal mind. And you'll feel right about it or you'll feel wrong about it.
And there's nothing wrong with trying things on to see how they feel.
That's
before
right.
you make the decision whether to keep it in your wardrobe or discard it.
That's right. As I get further and further into the research for my book, if it sounds more and more bogus, we're going to have another topic for the book. But this is where we're starting. Anyway, I wanted to explain it in conjunction with what Max Igan said, and give us a little better picture of what we're doing here. We're helping consciousness, which desperately wants to shift. It desperately wants to shift. This is the time, according to the Yuga cycles, according to astrology, according to everybody that's actually looked at this time in history, even parochial kind of religions know that this is a shift time. And that's why, well, you just need to look at the cabal. They're going crazy trying to keep us in the box. They're doing everything possible, including brute force, to keep us there. Mm-hmm. And lots of luck, because consciousness really wants to expand. And there's more and more of us every day helping it to expand. Anyway, I wanted to move along and get us into more evidence that the shift in consciousness that happened in 2012 is really happening. And I'm going to do it by doing a little review of incidents that I noted. I was writing down a while back what happened in 2014 that might indicate that the humans are waking up and things are moving forward. So it's like a year in review, but I see it all as positive things. The first one I want to talk about is the MMR linked to autism exposed. This is a big deal. The CDC, which is a marketing arm of the pharmaceutical industry, has been pushing and pushing vaccines. And you know that their purpose is to keep us in fear. Their purpose isn't, in the main line, certainly in the vaccine programs, to put us into health. And they did some research in 2004 as to the effectiveness or the adverse health effects that might be caused by mercury and virus in vaccines, and also this MMR vaccine that they give to young children.
What is that? Measles, mumps, rubella, I think.
I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
And now their whistleblower, there's one at least, and might be two, that have come forward and said that the information that study published was missing a large part of the data, and that large part of the data changes the findings. It changes the findings to indicate that the MMR vaccine is linked to autism, especially in boys, especially in black boys. Now that's a big deal, and it's a big deal especially since the CDC is not backing off. They're still prescribing that vaccine, and they're still harming children.
And I think they probably mandate it in your health insurance policy. If you don't vaccinate your children with that vaccine, they won't cover your expenses or something. I think it's basically a mandatory vaccine in the United States.
Absolutely is. So knowing that it's linked to autism, the people that are waking up and know what's going on the planet can't avoid that vaccine. The people that have children that have already been affected by that vaccine should be taking legal action. I'm sure the government will do everything they can to prevent that happening, but there should be a coalition happening. But the fact that we had a whistleblower search his conscience and come forward to expose that, and the fact that the CDC is not, admitting that that's happening, is a big deal. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a great thing that happened in 2014.
Mm-hmm. By the way, I just want to say, if anyone's listening that does have children that have had adverse effects from that MMR vaccine, I believe there's a woman named Dr. Carly who has a website that can reverse the damage done from, well, some of it anyway. So I just...
Right, but don't stop your lawsuit. I mean, we've got to stop them from vaccinating these people.
Right.
So that's the first one.
Okay, what's 2?
2 is MH370. The MH370, remember the Malaysian airliner that went missing?
Yeah.
Well, it's been pretty much proven that it was shot down by the U.S. And there is a link to, I believe it's Jay Rockefeller. He became sole owner of patented software that was owned before that in conjunction with 4 individuals who were on that plane. So that could have been a motive. It also, Alfred Lambermont Weber, our old friend again, said that it's in retaliation for the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, of which he was a judge. In other words, the control system doesn't like this war tribunal stuff, especially the ones that find them guilty. So they've been punishing Malaysia all along, and this is one of the punishments. But it's great that now we know, the awakening community knows. The people that are in the core have no idea. But the people that are awakening know that MH370 wasn't an accident. It didn't go missing. It was an actual military operation. Number 3, MH17. Now, MH17, now they find that there was a warplane, a Ukrainian warplane that came up and came back without its rockets. Remember, the story on the MH17 was that it was shot in the engine. And it started going down, and then it was shot again to put it on the ground by a Buk missile. So that's been pretty much pinned on Ukraine, especially since Russia published aerial satellite photos that exonerated the Russian military from having any involvement. So you take away the suspect that it was supposed to be blamed on, and you get the real perps. Also, I don't know whether you've seen our video. It's called currently Ebola in 3 minutes. Did we change the title on that?
We did What You Need to Know About Ebola.
It's called What You Need to Know About Ebola. It's a 6-minute film, and it'll set you straight about Ebola. It recounts the fact that there was a major official of the World Health Organization that was working in Sierra Leone and knew about the experimenting of the Ebola, not the Ebola vaccine, but the Ebola virus in that area, that it could have been given to patients and that there was no danger of it spreading. He was on his way to testify, I believe, to a NATO conference, and he was on, just coincidentally, MH17, which was shot down. But the community that's awakening knows that that was shot down. And it was supposed to be a false flag to get us involved with war with Russia. It didn't work. You see, what's good about these things is these are efforts that the cabal matrix controllers are trying to do to manipulate us. Before the return of Christos, or the shift in timeline, or whatever you want to call it, that happened December 21st, 2012, this probably would have got some traction because we were locked in what they call a duality consciousness, win and lose. Now we're moving quickly toward a unity consciousness, which is the shift in consciousness. And these things can't get traction. So that's how it's unfolding. The fourth one I have is Ebola was exposed. This was a beautiful operation. I was involved with, we were involved with it very much ourselves. We published 2 videos exposing the Ebola hoax. And we know a lot of other journalists, real journalists, that were exposing that, including John Rappaport, Red Pill Radio, Free
Radio Revolution.
Free Radio Revolution. A lot of the people were really on the ball, and they could see this thing coming, and they did a lot of work to expose this. This got no traction yet.
Right, but keep your eyes open in case they try to bring it back.
Right.
But isn't it great that these things which should have been hidden from the public, the light is shining on them. People can see through them now.
It's happening. We're waking up.
They can't be used to control us anymore if we know what they're doing.
Exactly. Also, I want to point to as number 5, mainstream media's race baiting in circumstances like the Ferguson riots, the New York City murder. I think people are becoming aware that they're being race baited, white against black. Now, the mainstream media, in conjunction with the government, will continue to do these things. But I think more and more people are waking up. And I hope that the people can see this not as a problem with the other race, not as a problem with the police, but as a problem with the control system. The control system, they puppet the police. The police really, the more I talk and think about them and know what they're doing now, they're totally under control of the system. And it's really, really too bad. And I feel sorry for them. If you operate for one of the arms of violence for this government, I understand your predicament. I understand what's happening. There's no excuse for it. You should be trying to stop and get out of it. There's forgiveness waiting on the other end. But you really should be realizing that you're working for the stunting of consciousness. If consciousness doesn't shift, the experiment's over. If consciousness doesn't shift, we just don't go into a little box and become controlled. It's over. The whole purpose of the universe is to expand consciousness. If we can't do it, it stops. Game over. We start again. You might be involved as an avatar. Your consciousness might be involved, or you might go back to source. But there's no reason for the experiment to continue. The experiment will have shown, now this is not going to happen, that human consciousness needs to do something different, be laden or be gifted with more creativity, something to get it through this little keyhole that we seem to be going through. But when consciousness does shift, oh man, it's going to be totally amazing, because we're going to get all the technology they keep from us. Global warming will be a thing of the past, if it ever existed at all, which I don't believe it did. But we certainly will be using Tesla technology that doesn't pollute at all for anything.
We'll have hovercrafts. We won't be driving around in combustion engines anymore.
That's right. I think death will be unnecessary, but I'm probably in the fringe on that one.
Could be, but I like the idea of that.
Right. Another one that I threw on my list was the exposure of Kevin Annette and the ITCCS. Now that was really good that we found that out. We found that disinformation agent working for the cabal was in there to try to disrupt that taking place. Now what's happened is it kind of backfired on them. It's like passing out LSD during the awakening in the 60s. It was supposed to really disrupt the awakening, but it ended up facilitating a lot of us to become more and more awake. What's happened with this are the people that worked for Kevin Annette, the people that Kevin Annette got together, including Alfred, are continuing with that work, and they are putting together real tribunals that are really going to be trying these people, and it'll come out more and more. The pedophilia that goes on, the child kidnapping, the sex trafficking is rampant on this planet. If you're waking at all, you know that that's true. And so that has to stop. And this is one of the mechanisms that probably will do it. Number 7, we need to talk about Sandy Hook. It's a great video. It was put together by independent journalists, and it exposes a lot of different stuff that Sophia Smallstorm didn't analyze in her video, which is, I think, the video that blows the Sandy Hook hoax totally apart. This gives new data, and definitely gives data that the control system is frightened of. What's strong about this, and why I think this is so positive, is the incredible censorship that this video received and is still receiving. It's very difficult to see it. It's highly censored. Why would they censor it? Well, they censor it because it has truth in it. Because the control system doesn't want you to go there. And I think the fact that they censored it so much, you see, all the things they try aren't getting traction. It's backfiring. It's not working on their behalf. It's really hurting them. Let's move on to number 8. I think what's happening with the pedophile rings all over the world, especially in England, being exposed by David Icke, every day on his website there's new allegations. Then there was the Rotherham incident where there was a pedophile ring of Pakistanis who were just routinely raping underage girls. It's in the news. It hasn't been broken up, but we're aware of it. Pedophilia is the common denominator in the toll control system throughout the whole world. There's no doubt about it, and it's coming out. They can't keep it under wraps anymore. It happens to such a degree that they can't keep it under wraps. Another thing is the learning about the 9th circle. I intend to do some broadcasts on this. This is child sacrificing. This is where people get together to do child sacrificing. Why do they do it? Well, that's how they gain power. Or that's how they think they gain power. They're following an entity that demands this type of ritualistic sacrifice. And it's coming out. It's coming out. Let me go on to the next one because I want to get to the positive future too. The 9th one is the ISIL exposed by us. We have a film out that exposes it. James Corbett has done an incredible job exposing ISIL. Why they're able to still use ISIL in their phony beheadings to engender fear is because people are still locked in this core reality. They need to look outside that reality and start realizing what's actually going on. I think number 10 would be the PSYOP in Korea that was used as an excuse to shut down the Korean internet, link Korea with Russia in their plot to create World War III. And also there was a movie called Interview that they pulled off because it had some derogatory remarks about Korea. It's a what's his name?
Rogen?
Seth Rogen film, yeah. I think they used this to promote that film. I mean, they're not above something like that.
No, of course they're not.
So what happened was Korea was supposedly attacked by cyber means. The Sunny company in Japan. I don't know whether anybody knows. I always thought that Sunny was just a Japanese corporation.
I always called it Sony.
You can call it Sony. I can call it Sunny. We can call them either.
As long as we know we're talking about the same company.
We're talking about a company
It's
that
an
took
electronics company, right?
Yeah. SONY stands for Standard Oil of New York. So it is a cabal-backed thing, as if any company that got that big wasn't. Another thing that's positive that just happened, New York State is suspending their fracking operations. There were 7 studies that did it, and those 7 studies, I mean, even the most bribed legislator, and I'm sure in New York, can you imagine how corrupt the New York State or New York City government is? They still had to suspend fracking. It was so damning. Another one was the exposure of the CIA and the police brutality. We had a program last on that. All that's coming out from behind the screen. It's interesting about police brutality. What happened was they exposed police brutality by posting YouTube videos, and they were posting so many videos all around the world that's really making a good case for, looking at what's going on. And I hope we can move beyond the police, realize that the police are put up to that. They're probably RFID chipped, which can control their emotions. They're covered with transhuman instruments that could be controlling their actions. I mean, these poor guys, there's no excuse for it, but certainly know where they're coming from. Also, what made a big impact for Mindy and I was David McGowan publishing weird scenes from inside the canyon, which really links the hippie movement with Satanism and the CIA intelligence control system. And it certainly is coming from the margins or the fringes, but it certainly allowed us to see things more clearly and link a lot of things together that we couldn't before. Thank you, David McGowan. And also we should say that Paul Marco publishes Belief Magic, an expose of how your beliefs are controlled and how you're controlled by your beliefs. Pick up a copy at Amazon.com.
Or from our blog, pineconeutopia.yolasite.com. And it's an excellent book. Really highly recommended, if I do say so myself.
Yes, right. All right, let's get into my 2015 predictions. 2015 is going to be an exciting year. I subscribe to the notion that consciousness is going to shift as drastically or more drastically in 2015 as it did in 2014. And we had some great things come out, as I just said. 2015 is going to be better. They're going to try harder. They're going to push more stuff on us. And we're going to see right through it and walk away from this. I think the next 2 years are critical. At the end of the next 2 years, we'll know whether consciousness was able to shift, which I think it will be, or whether they were able to end the experiment.
Lock us down.
Lock us down. And I will give as a disclaimer, I don't have any special abilities in predictions. Actually, I don't think I've ever made a prediction that's really come true.
Yeah, last year's track record wasn't very good.
No. I think you had one that did come true, but I didn't have any. And what I'm doing is just straight line, trying to see what they did this year and try to kind of think of what they'll do next year. So let's go with these.
Let's go with them.
Okay. First one, I think there'll be another attempt to vaccinate for Ebola or something. I think in the spring, they'll either have a whole bunch of Ebola cases, they'll try to scare people into taking the vaccines, and they might even move to martial law. They're going to try it. I don't think they'll get any traction, because I think they'll stay totally busted on the vaccine thing. We have to stay on them, though.
Let's hope so.
Everybody in the alternative community, the awakening community, stay on them. We can't let this thing erupt.
And remember that magic little word, no. Just say no. Don't let them vaccinate your children. Tell your friends. Tell your children not to vaccinate your grandchildren. Just don't let them do it, and don't go line up for any vaccine that's offered.
Right. Vaccine has, if you do any research at all, vaccine in humans have had such a bad track record. And there's so many organizations out to stop the vaccines, and there's been so many people hurt. I think vaccines, something that they need to restart if they're going to do it, because it's damaging. You know, the only people that get polio now are the people who are vaccinated against it. Number 2, I think ISIL will continue to be a source of media terror hype. I think they'll continue to ride that until everyone has seen our video, has seen James Corbett's work on that, and many other people have exposed this now. It's just a matter of getting people to wake up, get out of the core, get into what's really going on, get into truth. I think that in conjunction with that second prediction, there'll be a lot more terror attacks on the Five Eye countries. Now, the Five Eye countries are the countries, they're all English speaking. Was it Great Britain, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and the UK?
U.S.
And the U.S. Is that the Six Eye then?
Yeah. No, you said Great Britain first.
Oh,
and
the U.S. Okay, yeah. Well, they have a conjoined intelligence system. And that intelligence system is trying to get you to be afraid. So they're going to orchestrate terror attacks in all these countries. And of course, they're staged like the Sydney Chic. I mean, you don't have to look too deeply in that to realize that that was a staged event too, especially since they did a drill in that scenario exactly 1 year before. Look into it. You'll find that it's one of these false flags that I'm predicting.
Why do they call it the Sydney Chic?
That's what I call it.
Oh.
It took place in Sydney, and there was a sheik that did it.
Oh, it was a sheik that did it. Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't catch that.
That's right. I think that there'll be one false flag with the aim of gun control per week until legislation passes in the U.S.
Oh, let's hope not.
Yes. I think that they'll continue, and if we can continually expose them as false flags, I think that we won't see that legislation pass. But if that legislation passes, here's the word again. The word is no. Don't let them take your guns. That's not their property. It's a tool that you have for your self-defense, and you have a total right under common natural law to have self-protection. Also, I think it was my prediction number 4, we'll continue to see media pumping racism in America, or blaming the police blaming the protesters blaming the police. Remember, they always do divide and conquer, and they've got this thing started. They've got these riots started. They want to have an Arab Spring in the United States, and they've started this thing, and they're going to continue to pump that in the United States. People that are involved in those protests better be in the margins or in the fringes so that they can see what's going on, because this is how they manipulate you. They set up divide and conquer, and they've done it for thousands of years. It's time to stop. We're done with divide and conquer. We're all together. We're working in one direction. We're not blaming others. We're going to heal the planet. Number 5, I think there's going to be revelations on child pornography, ritual murder, child trafficking exposed this year. I think that's going to be a main deal. Last year and the year before, they were linking things with Jimmy Savile. This year, more and more things will come out, and they'll come out so hot and heavy that people can't stand it anymore. And whether they'll do it through the system or whether they'll wake up and actually get this to stop, you've got to get it to stop. You can't continually, ritualistically kill children on the 8 holidays. It's that'll happen. Number 6, I think the Vatican will make some strong moves toward becoming more like the New Age religions. Have a more liberal definition of what's going on. They'll attach themselves to a lot of the New Age propositions. including Eckhart Tolle, and who's the guy that's on the Club of Rome? Deepak Chopra.
Deepak Chopra, yeah.
He's going to move. The Pope is going to move more in that direction, and get this, he's going to adopt or become friendly with some of the tenets of Satanism. Now, he may not call it Satanism, but we've talked about the tenets of Satanism, and we've made videos about them. Find out what they are. And because his job now is to unite believers of all faiths to the New World religion.
One world religion.
The one world religion.
No
that's
more
where
division among people because of their religious beliefs, because
No.
they'll all join together in one. And we made a great video, Ebola, Eugenics, and Satanism. And in that video, Mark Passio describes the 4 basic tenets of Satanism. Excellent information.
Right, excellent information. Stop and watch that video. It's called Ebola, Eugenics, and Satanism.
That's right.
All right, what's another one? 7, continuing legitimizing of child sexuality in the schools and media and Hollywood. I think that we're going to be shocked with what we see. Remember the video with the little girl saying, fuck this and fuck that? Remember that?
I do remember that. I was shocked at that.
Right. And sex education starting younger and younger in schools,
Mm-hmm.
and the sexuality of youngsters in movies now coming out of Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'll see more and more of that. And I think this is the year that you'll see a backlash. That some parents will say, hey, that's not okay with me.
Right, and let's start seeing parents pull their children out of school and not standing for that anymore, because it's happening right in public schools.
Right. For being open-minded. It's a matter of corrupting children at a young age. You know, there's nothing wrong with sex or sexuality, but when you're 5 years old and you're a girl and you're being, I think there's a game it's sold as a present. It's like a pole dancing thing for young girls.
That's just absurd.
Right.
I mean, we can't stand for this anymore. We need to show some outrage and some backbone and say no.
Okay.
All right, what's next?
Number 8, police brutality will continue increasing, but communities will start forming protection mechanisms against the police.
Yay, I'd like to see that happen.
You'll see communities forming, so when the police come into the neighborhood, they go to the house that the police have a problem with. And they'll either stand there, they'll take videos, they'll be there monitoring the police. Them anymore. They're not operating within morality. They're not operating on their own. They're following the order of the satanic cabal. And it's as easy as that. So if you want to protect your community, you got to make a community, and you've got to realize what's going on. Again, this has to take place in the margins, because the core still believe that the police are there to protect and serve, which has never been the case, and certainly is not the case now. If you look at the film that was made right after the Boston bombing, when they came in and they enforced martial law in Boston, in effect. People don't realize that's a hostile force. They're not there to protect them. When somebody comes in, when somebody comes into your house and makes you stick up your hands and go out on the lawn, they're not on your side. They're not on your side. All right, let's move. I think that Russia will be either partially or totally bankrupted by the Western cabal. I think they can do this through controlling gas and oil. And if he's not going to come out and fight, provoke him into war, I think they're going to bust his economy. I look for that,
Mm-hmm.
which is not really good news.
No.
So I'm sorry I threw that in there. But if we can predict what they're going, maybe they won't be able to do it because they won't be able to get traction, because it's not us against them anymore. it's moving toward unity consciousness.
Right, we're all in this together.
I think also for my last prediction, this is prediction number 10, that the U.S. will try to impose Chinese model restrictions on the internet. I think that they'll try to do it through legislation, and then they'll try to do it through enforcing that legislation. And we need to, again, say no. But I also think, this is the positive part of this, I think that there are a lot of really intelligent, really creative young heroes in the community, in the fringe, marginal community, the creative community. They're going to find many creative ways to get around the internet. And you'll find positive ways to communicate that's not controlled by the cabal like Facebook and Twitter. I think you'll see that. Okay, that's my predictions for 2015.
Good job.
So much for the predictions. Let's move along to the last item on my agenda here. A couple weeks ago, I interviewed Ole Damegard, and he was such a delightful guy, and his heart's so full of love that I got very inspired to be creative. And you know that creativity is the thing that's going to defeat the cabal, not violence. It's going to be saying no and creativity. So I came up with a creative idea that may or may not be good, but I want to run it by you so that you can hear maybe a marginal, fringy kind of creative way to deal with the cabal. Let me read the first couple paragraphs that explains what I was getting at here. The Forgiveness Project, an idea whose time has come. The Forgiveness Project is rooted in unitive consciousness as a solution to the destruction of our sacred planet and the elimination of the human race as well as all the other species on the planet. And then I go on to explain Alfred's idea of the timeline shift. Since December 21st of 2012, humanity has shifted to a positive, unitive-based timeline. Since then, the situation and outlook is becoming increasingly bad for the negative cabal that wants to control the planet using the methods and tools of duality. Things are going so badly, in fact, likely many disciples of the dark side and other souls trapped by deception and trickery want to defect and join the light. They, however, feel trapped in their, quote, deal with the devil, and know that this archontic force will attempt to crush them if they try to break free and join the light. For example, Michael Jackson. They likely feel that they have made their choice and now must serve their evil masters until the end. And what I'm saying is, not in this timeline. The Forgiveness Project offers a way to speed up the global awakening and presents another chance for these seemingly lost souls by allowing everyone involved, including those who have literally signed in blood, to come to unity consciousness and end up on the winning side and become a force for the good. Since the coming together of humans in the name of love and the spirit of forgiveness becomes part of the divine unfolding, the act of forgiveness from such a collective holds the power of exoneration. Love and forgiveness held in a state of sincere gratitude allows communal consciousness to act as a freeing force, trumping any force that must hold duality. In the Forgiveness Project, in other words, through forgiveness of the divine engineered by those involved in the Forgiveness Project, the dark forces must release its grasp because of that act and in accordance with the positive timeline now unfolding. Duality consciousness can no longer hold sway over its minions without their ongoing consent because of the pull of unitive. Now this is my conceptuality, and I'm thinking that Actually, what I had in mind were people, movie stars, who have signed in blood for their careers. People in politics who have signed in blood for their careers and fame and fortune. You know, the duality consciousness, the evil force is losing hold, as you can see by all the stuff we've talked about on this podcast. It's coming apart at the seams. And these people, if they feel that they're held by these contracts, well, they have to realize what the contract is holding. The contract is holding their physical existence, but their soul is still a soul. It's still a creation of the divine force. And so I'm sure that the duality conscious cannot continue to hold this force if they seek forgiveness. And I've got some ideas on what they probably should do. First of all, they'd have to admit to the Forgiveness Project or the public or I don't know who it could be, what's been done to them, how they were ensnared in their self-serving duality meme. Number 2, confess with sincerity to any and all the wrongdoing that they did in service to their archontic masters. Then third, promise not to continue in the service of duality. What we want to do is stop the madness. We want to stop the torture. We want to stop the deception. We want to stop the child kidnap and murder. Number 4, apologize to humanity for their service against them. After that's done, people involved with the Forgiveness Project acknowledge their apology as a divine entity and then grant forgiveness and free them from their contract with the dark forces. Now, positive timeline is happening. Duality consciousness can no longer hold sway. So these people can be released. I would love for them to get in touch with me and we can go further into how this divine consciousness works, how people gather together in the name, how people gather together in forgiveness, in gratitude and love, become part of the divine. It's as simple as that. When people meet, there's something even in Christianity about people gathering in the name. They get a certain power. It's a power because they're acting on behalf of the divine. If you consider the divine like I am as an unfolding process, not an entity outside of you, you realize that when people come together in gratitude, love, and forgiveness, they become something other than themselves. They become part of the divine consciousness. And as part of the divine consciousness, as they stay in that love, they can act on behalf of the divine consciousness and act as a forgiving force on behalf of the divine consciousness. So, now the nuts and bolts of how this can be done, how we can assemble people, how we can get into a ritual that would put us into this divine consciousness where we can act on behalf of the divine. These are things that I still think that we need to work out and work on. But I think that forgiveness and the idea of forgiveness, I think forgiveness is the key, bottom line. And can you imagine what would happen when we get this off the ground? You have somebody like, I don't know, pick your generic movie star. Tom Cruise, Gwyneth Paltrow. Now you know, if you know about Hollywood and the satanic influence of Hollywood, that they've had to sign to get their career off the ground. But what I've noticed is the people that seem to be tricked into signing, are people who kind of are coming from a family that's, say, connected with the cabal and the ruling force, come from a family that's connected with the intelligence community, or else come from a totally helpless background. I mean, people from a totally helpless background would be people like James Dean and Nick Adams. They were male prostitutes when they were teenagers. They were picked up in Hollywood and made stars. Well, certainly, they're without, from that perspective, offering them fancy cars and, they'll do anything for that. So they're very vulnerable. People like Jim Morrison, raised in an intelligence family, had to become part of the CIA's corruption of the peace and equality movement and perversion into the hippie movement. He probably had very little choice. Now they all have a choice. And I think that's the way divinity would want it. I think another chance is always offered. But there's some criteria here. I want them to acknowledge what they're doing, what they've done, explain the contract, and then become forgiven. Now, can you imagine if that started happening? All of a sudden, all these people that are controlling the people in the core are turning them on to the fringe, what's really happening out there, how they were really conned, and them standing up for gun control. It wasn't because they really have an opinion on gun control. Certainly they don't have an opinion on gun control. They can't have an opinion on gun control. They're in service of the dark force. So they're told what their opinion is. They can get their opinion back. They can become awake. They can become, and what a powerful force for positive action that would be. Can you imagine somebody like, you could pick any movie star. Pick a movie star.
Susan Sarandon.
Susan Sarandon, coming forth, explaining what's going on in Hollywood, how she was asked to sign, and then coming over to the light side. Helping people, actually probably getting involved in the Forgiveness Project. Getting more and more people out of that bind that they have with the dark force. So I think it would spring things loose very quickly, very rapidly, and we're going to be working on that all 2015. So if you'd like to help, contact us at pineconeutopia@gmail.com or go to our website.
Our website is pineconeutopia.yolasite.com.
Right. This is an idea still in the formation stage. You can be involved if you'd like. If you're a disinformation agent, remember that if you decide to come on with us, you're not only hurting yourself, you're hurting all the other members that have signed with the cabal. You're not helping human consciousness expand. So I welcome any sincere people that want to help on this project. Call us up. We'll be talking more about this in subsequent programs. It's called the Forgiveness Project right now, and that's where we're going with that.
We'll see how that evolves. Well, we're about at the end of our show today. It's been wonderful having you join in with us. We'd love to hear from you. So contact us through our blog or through our email, pineconeutopia@gmail.com. And we're in this together. So we welcome your ideas, your inputs.
Right, we are all in this together.
We are.
And we're all going to be in it together in 2017, 2018, 2019, when this archontic force is finally totally hogtied and out of our way. We'll be enjoying technology. We'll be enjoying our own technology again. We'll be able to get back into things that we used to be able to do, like telepathic communication. It'll be a wonderful time.
It sure will. And listen, while you're at it, do pick up a copy of Paul's book, Belief Magic. You'll be so happy you did. It's a wonderful read, full of great information and entertaining. He has a good sense of humor. That's about it. Can you think of anything else?
No, that sounds good.
All right. Well, tune in again next week. We'll look forward to spending another 2 hours with you next week.
It's been lovely having you here and talking with you.
And check out our YouTube channel, Pinecone Utopia's YouTube channel, for all our videos. Until next time, be well, stay happy, be nice to each other.